Welcome. This is a kickoff meeting for an open space inventory / flood resilience project that WestCOG is working on. I'm Mike Toll, I'm the Deputy Director at WestCOG, and I'm also working with Tucker Beckett, a data scientist at WestCOG. He's the lead on the project. He's the one who's going to be doing all the heavy lifting and data collection and point of contact for any questions we have as the project unfolds. So what we're going to cover in this meeting is I'm going to give you some background on the project, where it's coming from, and kind of like what our big goals are. And then I'm going to end up handing it off to Tucker, and Tucker's going to go into a little bit about the CRS program, not too much. It's called the Community Rating System. It's a FEMA program. He'll explain more. The scope and schedule of our project, because it's twofold. It's that open space inventory component. It's got that flood resilience component, and we have some target items we want to meet. We'll also go into the open space schema that we're using to create this inventory, and you can see that and what characteristics we're considering for what properties we will be looking at for open space. And because you're going to see it's rather broad, but we have definitions and stuff to kind of wrangle in a bunch of properties. And then I'll show you some data that we've collected so far, give you an idea of some of the inventories that we're collecting, and give you some insight about what our practices will be to collect some data. And then we'll take questions at the end and answer whatever you might have for questions on the project. The fact that I mentioned the community rating system, or CRS, or flood resilience, coming from WestCOG, it might be familiar. This is an avenue we explored in the past. So I think it was back in 2016, might have been earlier. It was one of my first projects. There was a thought that this is a program that could be handled regionally, and we explored that as a regional service for the region. And what we ended up running into was that the program is very intensive, and it requires a lot of that municipal input. And so it was a role that we were trying to roll it out as WestCOG, heavy hand, take care of the whole program, and just sign towns up, and they just get a bunch of benefits and everyone's happy. The CRS and FEMA side of it really needed to have input from the towns directly, and we found that we weren't able to play that role. It also was super intensive. We'd have to have a full-time dedicated staff member to even have a chance of doing the program correctly. So we actually had to rein it back. We did create a lot of resources. We learned a lot about the CRS program. And so that's kind of how we're ready to do a project that we're going to do now. And you'll learn more about it. The Nature Conservancy came to us with some funding that they were looking to use. And that funding was meant to be used for flood resilience projects. Coastal resilience was the main theme, but flood resilience it's allowed to do flood resilience as well. And the product I pitched to them was an open space inventory, tied with the fact that open space is a critical component for the CRS program. You can get a ton of credit in the CRS program if you have a good open space inventory, especially because you got a showcase where you have open space where there's flood zones. So if you're protecting your flood zones, that's good. And the program likes that, gives a lot of credit. And they really like this concept because there's a need on both ends. So the need on the open space side is that our open space inventory in WestCOG, I can certainly speak for, is old. It's from 2008. It's only for the southern towns, and it's not built in a standard that is compatible with what we're trying to push as the state standard for open space inventory data. So it's very much in high demand because we don't have data for the north, and the data for the south is very old. So open space data, very much needed. And on the flood resilience side, there are increasing costs for flood insurance for homeowners in flood zones. And we're also seeing, we don't have to go look very far to find examples of intensive weather events and flooding. So with Hurricane Ida and Henri, for example. So the need to prepare towns and take note and stock of what communities are using to protect their communities is more important, is in the spotlight for sure. So that's the idea, is that we can kind of collect this inventory, get some real good data product for the region to have and be aware of its open space, and position towns to be in a good position if they want to take advantage of the CRS program. So TNC loved that idea, and they aren't able to make it today, but they did send some words, and they are super grateful to be funding a project like this to tie in open space and coastal resilience. These are both big topics that they like to work in, both of these fields. And they are also happy to see that open space kind of getting a nice spin to it. You know, it's folks certainly love the idea of conserving land, protecting habitat, all the ecological benefits of open space and conservation, maybe recreational benefits too. But the fact that you can showcase and say it's protecting our communities. It's a buffer between some major flood events if you have open space in a flood zone. That's a great plus. And then it's also really exciting to showcase open space as a way to provide discounts, save people in their wallets because they're paying less for flood insurance premiums. So they're super excited about this project, and they'll be working with us as kind of like guides, and we'll be reporting to them because they're the funding source for this project, the Nature Conservancy. And all right, so with all that said, I'm gonna pass it off to Tucker Beckett because he's got the slides, he's got the know-how, and he's been kind of setting up this project. So Tucker, I'll pass it off to you.
All right. Thanks, Mike. And thank you all for taking the time to be here today. So I'm going to be introducing our project here. As we said, this meeting will be recorded and put up on our website as a resource for later. I'll also include this presentation. So to start out, why are we trying to inventory open space? One of our primary goals here is to help our WestCOG communities get involved in FEMA's community rating system, or CRS. For those of you that aren't familiar with CRS already, it's a tier-based program that rewards communities for carrying out specific planning activities tied into flooding mitigation and planning. Towns can earn between 5 to 45% discounts on flood insurance for their community members as they climb through the tiers. Towns within Connecticut that are already involved are at between Class 9 and Class 7, which is between 5 to 15% discounts. Now, preserving open space alone can earn up to 10%, can get you up to that Class 8, but that has to be documented, and that's the important part that we're going to get to. One of our secondary goals here is to support our WestCOG municipalities in earning sustainable CT certification, as carrying out an open space inventory is an important portion of that as well. So where does WestCOG fit in? We're here to provide regional support by creating a central open space inventory for our region. This should facilitate open space preservation credit for our municipalities and mitigate some of that initial investment for involvement in CRS. A bit more detail on CRS. To be eligible for credit, land has to be first within the regulatory floodplain, which basically just means within the significant flood hazard area as delineated on flood insurance rate maps, or equivalent local regulations that prohibit building and such. It has to be under their definition of open space, which means that it's free from buildings, large impervious surfaces, or other barriers to flood flows. A pretty broad definition. The third component is it has to be preserved as open space in some way. Now, for public and nonprofit landowners, this can simply be a written statement of intent saying we are not going to build here, we're not going to store fill here, etc. For other properties, it can be that the property is subject to development regulations that prohibit buildings and fill, such as like certain wetland restrictions, things like that. And it doesn't even have to be the entire parcel. It can also be deed restricted, and this actually earns bonus points under CRS. The amount of credit that you get for an amount of open space is based on a ratio of the eligible land within a town to the total significant flood hazard area within the town. But to get credit, eligible land has to be mapped and its preservation documented in some way. And that's where we're stepping in. So backing up a little bit, here are some examples of eligible open space. Local or state parks, preserved land trust properties, golf courses owned by nonprofits, public pools, publicly accessible waterfronts are a big one, or private yards that are within regulated floodplains. So our timeline for this project, first step is already completed. We've created a schema for storing all of this data, and it combines elements that are important both to CRS and to sustainable CT to kill two birds with one stone there. Our next step is already ongoing. We're acquiring data. Once we have all that data, we'll be working to build out this inventory and eventually disseminate it to you all and to the public. And this will be completed by sometime in mid-November. And I'm gonna show you all the schema real quick. Can everyone see?
Yeah, it looks clear, Tucker. And also
Right.
a shout out to Aaron Boudris, who's on the call. I know you made a lot of work to make the sustainable CT schema, and you're going to see it's very familiar because we took all of it and then added a few. But I'll let Tucker showcase.
We definitely borrowed a lot of the structure and tried to build it out to make it useful for both elements here. Just some basic features. An identifying name for the property, parcel ID, town, a general usage category for the property, what type of property it is, the listed owner, the type of owner, whether it's public, nonprofit, or otherwise private, whether the parcel is eligible for CRS credit at all. Whether the property is preserved or protected, the type of protection offered to it, links to reference documents for that preservation, public access, and here we're getting into the quantitative fields, and these are going to be very important. The full acreage of the property, the acreage that legal open space protection applies to, the acreage of the property that's within the regulatory floodplain, the acreage that's covered by impervious surfaces.
Share. Okay. And so Tucker did just finish going through the various categories that he created, but you can see, yeah, this is not the same file they had, but just to showcase some of the work that the schema is very similar to what Sustainable CT put together. So you can see we have owner categories. Is the owner local, state, federal? Is it a land trust? Is it a nonprofit? Is it private? We also have a private other. Is it protected through an easement? Is it protected by the municipality, the state, the federal? Is it deed-restricted? Is there a written agreement for how it's protected? Is access restricted, unrestricted, or is it just not mentioned? So those are the kind of things we're thinking about for our schema. Oh, Tucker, welcome back. I got the recording going again, and I was just showing them the various categories. Sorry. Do you have more to share? I should probably switch off here. I'll stop my share. Oh, Tucker, you're muted. Maybe your audio is loading up. No, I don't hear anything. Spooky. All right. Tucker, please just interrupt me when you have your audio connected. I will carry on.
Better?
You're there. I can hear you.
Excellent. So that was an earlier version of the document. We've added the acreage that's within the significant flood hazard area, and also the amount of, this is a field that will likely remain null, but unless we have time to get to it, but the amount of acreage that's natural function open space, which is a sort of bonus component to the open space preservation credit, which can earn some additional points for keeping open space land in its natural state. So what to expect from us moving forward? We'll be reaching out to you for available data if we haven't already. Land trusts, we're going to be looking for a list of your own properties. And municipalities, we're going to be looking for any and all existing open space data that you have. We'll also likely be reaching out regarding those documents of preservation. We'll also be reaching out to you to give you project updates. If there's anyone who's not here that you'd like to receive these updates, please let me know and I'll add them to the distribution list. Also, once the project is getting towards completion, we'll be putting up an open space web map, which will be an interactive map viewer so that you can see the amount of open space within your town which qualifies for CRS credit. And this will look something like this, where you can click on a parcel and you'll be able to see all of this data.
All right.
Can you go into an example of some of the data we have?
Yes, I will showcase some of the data we have here. So, okay, I will now share. We've been collecting some data already, and what basically our job is to do is collect as much as we can for the whole. I should make the note for Fairfield County. That was how the funding came in. So we're actually, that's why we have MetroCOG joining us, NVCOG, because we're trying to collect this data for communities in Fairfield County. So I'm just so used to working in WestCOG, so I apologize, I mentioned that earlier. So we'll be working outside our region. We're working with MetroCOG. As I understand, Mark Hoover's on, and he explained that they have already some inventories of open space that they've been working on. So I look forward to kind of fast forwarding our work, working with them. Let's see, I have some municipal data here, and I started collecting data through sustainable CT inventories. I can go right online and see what the documents that have been provided for sustainable CT. So we have some communities that provide data that way. Communities that are involved in the CRS program, will reach out to them and see what inventories they have available. And already right at the bat, I can see that we're dealing with, for the case of Ridgefield, they have 1,000 properties that they listed in their inventory. And a lot of them are mentioned as either easements. So we have a bunch of variety in the types of properties that we're looking at, especially in size too. Some of them are many acres. So here we go. We got location, just to go through what it kind of looks like. We got location that lists in the street name. We have where the record is stored. We have the type of open space that they're providing. You know, is it an easement? Is it open space? And then we have also information on the donor who gave it and the jurisdiction that manages it. The town managing it? Is it a conservation commission? And then some special information. This is pretty different than what our goal is with our schema. So what we notice that a lot of towns collect this information in different ways, and so we'll have to kind of find a way to crosswalk it, and that's where we're going to be spending a lot of our time in, is crosswalking the data to make it in one format to another and see where we stand. So that's probably where we'll have a lot of follow up and connecting with towns to try to get there, so we can get a really kind of intensive schema that is, you know, agreed upon by hopefully by the state, but we also can share and look and compare among towns. So that's an example of what kind of data we're collecting. Here's a Stanford collection. I can tell this is from their CRS work because they're talking about acreage and the name of the property and the parcel ID. So it's going to be pretty easy for us to connect with the parcel ID with our own parcel data. WestCOG collects parcel data pretty regularly, so we can connect it that way. That'll be good. And then Here's an example in New Canaan. You know, this data, I can see it. I think this is just showing me recent ones. So we're seeing this is probably not comprehensive. So we're going to have to probably do some more digging there. And Greenwich, I know, has done a ton of work in collecting data on their open space. So this example is from their sustainable CT effort, but I know they actually have probably more, you know, data. So we have to, you know, we have to do a lot of collecting. We'll collect as much as we can, and then for that data input part, we'll try to figure out ways to automate and speed that up. It's going to be intensive. We're going to focus on properties that overlap the flood zones. We don't have to necessarily start working on the whole town for all of this region. We can focus on those properties that overlap with flood zones, and that's our strategy for that. So I'll stop my share there, and Tucker, I think that's where we. Yes, that is it for what I have in my notes. So I will open it up for questions, and I thank you for hearing us out on our project and kicking us off.